throughout this training title, I'm going to be using different keyboard shortcuts, and that's going to speed up my workflow. And because I'm going to be using them on a regular basis, I wanted to share with you some of those keyboard shortcuts. And also, since we're going to be using our brush tool to do most of our dodging and burning, these keyboard shortcuts are related to the brush tool itself. So if I were to now switch to any tool, and if I press the letter B, that's the default keyboard shortcuts to switch me to the brush tool. And if I were to continue to press the letter B, it will cycle through the rest of these related tools, and they're all bundled together under the same icon. Also, my swatches here are now black and white, and that's exactly what they are by default. But let's say I have my swatches set to some other colors. That's because I was painting or I was using gradients and I used just different colors. Well, the keyboard shortcut to reset them to their default values would be the letter D. D stands for default. And if I were to press now the letter X, that's going to exchange the swatches. That's pretty much like pressing these two little icons down here. Alright, now let's take a look at opacity and flow. Well, opacity you control by pressing any of the letters on your numeric side of the keyboard. So right now it's set to 100%. Let's say I want to switch to 50%. I'll press the letter 5. That sets it to 50%. If I want it to 55%, that's 5 twice in a row. If I wanted to set it to 5%, that's 0 5. And if I wanted to set it to 100%, that's 0. Now you can set it to 1%. You can only, you can set it to 0%. You can only lower it to 1%. Now let me show you. If I were now to lower this, I can go lower than 1%. Even if I write here 0 and press enter, it's gonna prompt me with the message that says that I have to choose between 1 and 100%. So if you want to get to, let's say, number 2%, you would press 0.2, and if you want just 1%, 0.1. But you can go lower than that, and if you do press 0, it's going to take you to 100%. Well, how do you then set flow? I think the keyboard shortcut, if you do the same thing by pressing the shift key, you would change the flow instead of opacity, but for me, for some reason, it doesn't work. So what I have to do, that's a proven way, is to simply choose the airbrush mode here, and now I'm going to control the flow with the same keyboard shortcuts. So 38%, 38. It's going to switch my flow instead of opacity this time. If I wanted to set it to, let's say, 1%, 0 1. 100% would be 0. And that's how you control these two values. Now let's take a look. If I right click anywhere on the canvas, this little fly pop-up menu will appear, and it's going to let me know what the size and the hardness of my brush is. Well, let's say I want to change that. If you want to do it old school, there are two keyboard shortcuts that have been in Photoshop for lots of versions, and those would be the left and the right bracket keys. So left bracket keys will lower the size of my brush, and the right bracket key will increase the size of my brush. If I wanted to affect the hardness with this, I would just use the shift key plus left and or right bracket key, and that's going to affect the hardness instead of the size of my brush. Well, there's also one other keyboard shortcut, but before I show you that one, I want to show you these two other ones that are kind of like basics, but they're quite useful. First one is that if you hold down your Alt key, you temporarily switch between the brush tool to your eyedropper tool, this one, and that's going to allow you to sample a color from the image itself. New to Photoshop CS5, I believe, is that if you hold down your Alt and your Shift key and then you press your right mouse button, it's going to show you the color picker in this way, and this only works if your graphic card supports OpenGL drawing. This is kind of new to CS5. And I'm going to switch my black color as it was. Well, there's also one other thing, that if you click somewhere and if you want to draw a straight line, you hold down your Shift key and you draw a straight line. You can create the letter Z or the Zorro sign. Okay, now the next thing I wanted to show you also has to do with OpenGL drawing. And to make sure that you have this option, go to Edit, Preferences, and General, or press the Controller Command K. And if you go under Performance, here under GPU settings, it says detected video card. It has in fact detected my graphic cards, and this allows me to enable this option, enable OpenGL drawing. If I have that on, then I can see how the size of my brush is on the fly, and I can also change the hardness of my brush. Now let's see how that works. It involves some interesting keyboard shortcuts. Now first of all, it has changed from CS4 to CS5, and I'm going to try to explain how it works in both of the versions. So for instance, if I wanted to change on PC, and it's a bit different to do it on Mac as opposed to PC. If I wanted to do it on PC, I wanted to change the size of my brush, I would hold down my Alt key, my right mouse button, and that's going to give me the preview. At this point, all I have to do is move left and right to affect the size of my brush, and up and down to affect the hardness of my brush. So let me enlarge that so you can see better. Now on the Mac, it's a bit different. Instead of clicking on the right mouse button, so remember on PC was Alt plus right mouse button and then moving your mouse. Well, on the Mac, instead of clicking on the right mouse button, first you click, instead of Alt, you click Option. So it's Option, Control, not Command, Control key. So it's Option, Control key, and then you move your mouse. That's how you affect the size. And if you want to affect the hardness of your brush, this is I think true for CS4. In CS5 we can move it up and down, that's going to affect the hardness. But in CS5, if we did that, it's going to give us that color picker that I just showed you. Now in case you're not seeing that color picker just the way I showed it to you, you can go to your preferences, and under interface, actually under general, here under hot picker color, you can change between different ways of viewing the hue wheel, and I chose mine here. So let me show you how you can affect the hardness of your brush using that preview on CS4. Well, on PC it will be Alt plus Shift key and then the right mouse button, and then you move your mouse left and right to affect the hardness. On Mac, however, you would have to press your Control key, your Command key, your Option key, and then you move your mouse left and right. It's a pretty long keyboard shortcut. But when you're viewing this video, you should probably see a notation down here of what buttons you need to press, so that's going to help you. And I think this pretty much concludes how the keyboard shortcuts work. And of course, as the Steve Jobs says, one more thing. If you remember, when I increase the size of my brush or the hardness this way, I get this red preview. Well, what happens if you're working on an image that's all red? It will be hard to see that preview. Well, there is an option for you there to change that color of the preview. And if you go to other your preferences, again, Control or Command K, under cursors, here you can change the brush preview to some other color, like green maybe, or whatever the case might be. And that's how you would affect these keyboard shortcuts. Use your keyboard shortcuts to affect different parameters for your brush tool.